At 68, I got a phone call from a bank I had never borrowed money from about a mortgage I never signed. The house my father built with his own hands was 90 days from foreclosure, and the only person who could have done it was my brother. My name is Leonard Hartwell, retired civil engineer, 40 years designing drainage systems, overpasses, and load-bearing structures across Ohio. I know how things are supposed to hold together. I know what stress looks like before the whole thing gives way. I just never thought I'd have to apply that to my own family. It was a Tuesday morning in February. I was in the garage sorting through old toolboxes when my cell rang, unknown in number, local area code. A woman named Carol Briggs from First Midwest Bank told me, in a calm professional voice, that the property at 41112 Delwood Avenue was 90 days past due on its mortgage payments. Foreclosure proceedings were beginning unless arrangements were made. I said, "I'm sorry? What mortgage?" She gave me the loan number, the origination date, the balance, $150,000, taken out 3 years ago. I had never seen that document, never signed anything, never received a single statement. I thanked her, told her I'd call back, and stood in my garage for a long time with the phone in my hand. Delwood Avenue was the house my father built in 1971. He poured the foundation himself, framed the walls with 2 of his buddies from the plant, and moved his young family in before Christmas that year. My brother Clifford and I grew up in that house. We fought over the bathroom, threw a baseball through the back window twice, and sat at that kitchen table every Sunday for 20 years. When Dad died 4 years ago, he left the Delwood house and a small rental property on Carver Street to both of us equally. I have the original will in a lockbox in my bedroom closet. The week before he passed, Dad pressed it into my hands and said, "You keep this, Lenny. You're the careful one." I was the careful one. Clifford was the charming one. He'd been a real estate broker for 25 years. He knew contracts, property law, financing. So when Dad's estate went through probate, it made sense for Clifford to manage things. He said it would be easier if I signed a limited power of attorney so he could handle paperwork, tenant communications, and maintenance decisions without needing my signature on every single document. I want to be honest about something right now because I think it matters. A power of attorney is one of the most useful legal tools you can give someone you trust. It lets them act on your behalf, sign documents, manage accounts. Most people sign them for aging parents or close family members without thinking twice. I didn't think twice. I signed it at his kitchen table on a Saturday afternoon while Nadine, his wife, made sandwiches. What I didn't know then, and what a lot of people don't realize, is that a power of attorney can be written with specific limits. Mine had one critical restriction. It explicitly prohibited Clifford from encumbering any jointly owned real property. That means he was not allowed to take out a mortgage against Delwood or Carver Street. He did it anyway. He mortgaged Delwood for $150,000 in 3 years after I signed that document, and he did it using my name, my authorization, and a legal instrument that clearly forbade exactly that action. But I didn't know any of this yet on that February morning. What I knew was that something was wrong, and I knew who was responsible. I did not call Clifford that day. I want to be clear about that choice. Every instinct told me to pick up the phone and demand an explanation. I've thought about why I didn't, and the honest answer is that I spent 40 years in engineering. You don't confront a structural failure before you understand where it started. You pull the drawings, you read the specs, you find out what actually happened before you start talking. So I called Beverly instead. Beverly is my daughter. She's 38, a pharmacist, and she has her mother's ability to cut through noise and get to the point. I told her what the bank said. She was quiet for a moment and then asked one question. "Dad, how much rent have you received from Carver Street in the past 4 years?" I told her the answer was 0. Clifford always had a reason. Repairs 1 quarter, a difficult tenant the next, a dispute over the lease after that. I had let it go every time because he was my brother and I trusted him, and the amounts spread across months never felt urgent enough to push. Beverly said, "I'll call Philip. Philip is my son. He's 35, lives in Seattle, works in software. He flew in 2 days later. By the time he landed, he had already been pulling public records online, property transaction histories, business entity filings. He printed everything and spread it across my kitchen table that evening. There was a company called Briarwood Property Group, LLC. Registered in Ohio, sole owner, Clifford Ray Hartwell Incorporated 4 years ago. The same year Dad died, the same year I signed the power of attorney, every rent check from Carver Street for 4 years had gone into Briarwood's account. Not a joint account, not my account. A shell company my brother created the same month I handed him my trust. Philip set the last page down and looked at me across the table. I looked at the documents for a long time. Then I said, "Get me the name of a good forensic accountant." Stuart Collier's office was on the 9th floor of a building downtown that I had actually helped permit back in 1998. I remembered the drainage specs on that project. Funny how the mind works. Stuart was around 50, quiet, methodical. He wore reading glasses he kept taking off and putting back on while I talked. The kind of man who speaks in facts and doesn't offer opinions unless you ask for them directly. I liked him immediately. I laid everything out on his desk. The power of attorney, the bank call from Carol Briggs, the Briarwood Property Group filing Philip had found 4 years of zero rental income from Carver Street, the $150,000 mortgage on Delwood that I had never authorized. When I finished, Stuart took his glasses off and set them on the desk. "Do you still have the original will?" he asked. "Locked in my bedroom closet," I said. "My father gave it to me the week before he died." He nodded slowly. "Good. I have a feeling we are going to need it." Over the next 3 weeks, Stuart pulled records I did not even know I could access. Bank statements tied to Briarwood. Wire transfers going back 4 years. The full mortgage documents Clifford had filed using the power of attorney, including the specific language of the instrument that explicitly prohibited encumbering jointly owned real property. He cross-referenced every transaction date against the public filing history for Briarwood. Then he found something else. He called me on a Thursday afternoon and asked me to come in. When I sat down, he had 2 documents placed side by side on his desk. On the left was a photocopy of Dad's will. On the right was a page from the original I had brought in. The numbers were different. In the original will, both properties were split 50-50 between Clifford and me. In the photocopy Clifford had been using with his attorney, the Carver Street property was listed at 70% Clifford and 30% Leonard. The font was slightly different on one line. The spacing was off. Someone had altered the photocopy and printed a clean version. Dad had given me the original, and the original said something entirely different. Stuart set his glasses down again. "Mr. Hartwell, over 4 years, Briarwood Property Group received approximately $100 in rental income from the Carver Street property. That money should have been split equally between you and your brother. You received none of it. Additionally, your brother used your power of attorney to take out $150,000 against the Delwood property. That instrument explicitly prohibited that action. We can document all of it with bank records, transfer histories, and the mortgage filing itself." I asked him what came next. "We get you a good attorney," he said, "and then we let the paperwork do the talking." Shirley Holt had been handling estate and property disputes in Cincinnati for over 20 years. Beverly found her through a colleague. Shirley was direct, unhurried, and when I walked her through everything Stuart had found, she asked exactly 2 questions. The first was whether I had the original will secured. The second was whether I had said anything to Clifford yet. I told her no to both. "Good," she said. "Don't. Not yet. I want to explain something about the weeks that followed because people sometimes ask how I managed to act normal around Clifford during that period. The answer is that I had spent 40 years in project management. When you're waiting for a structural inspection or a permit approval, you do not call the inspector every day. You prepare your documentation, you verify your compliance, and you wait. Showing urgency before you're ready only invites problems. So I waited. 2 weeks after I hired Shirley, Clifford called to say he was coming by. He showed up on a Sunday afternoon with Nadine. She was dressed like she had a meeting to get to, carrying a leather portfolio like this was a quarterly review. Clifford sat across from me at my kitchen table with the same smile he has had since we were kids. The one that means he is about to ask for something and has already decided how the conversation ends. "Lenny," he said, "I have been thinking about the estate. It has been dragging on too long. I put together something that would close everything out cleanly." He slid a document across the table. I looked at it without picking it up. It was a formal agreement, legal language, notary lines. The terms were straightforward. I would transfer my full interest in both properties to Clifford in exchange for a one-time buyout payment of $40,000. 2 properties with a combined market value of roughly $500,000. He was offering me $40,000 to walk away from all of it. Nadine leaned forward slightly. "You have your pension, Leonard. You are comfortable. Clifford still has obligations. College coming up. The house, this is just practical. It is what makes sense for the family." I let the silence sit for a moment. "How much is the Carver Street property worth right now?" I asked. Clifford said around $180,000, but after expenses and what it needs in repairs, and Delwood, with the work it needs, maybe $320,000. "But the mortgage has to come off the top, right?" I said. "The mortgage you took out." He stopped smiling. "Let me think about it," I said. "I will need a few days to read through this carefully." Clifford looked relieved. Nadine looked satisfied. They left thinking they had already won. I called Shirley that evening and told her what had happened. She said, "Good. Let them think you're considering it." 3 weeks later, Clifford organized a family dinner at his house. Aunts, cousins, his wife's side of the family. About 20 people around 2 pushed-together tables. Halfway through the meal, Clifford stood up and gave a short speech about how the estate had created tension and how he hoped the family could help Leonard see reason and move forward together. Every face at that table turned to look at me. I said, "I'm still reviewing things. I will let everyone know when I'm ready." Clifford's expression did not change, but his eyes did. He was not expecting that. I drove home, called Shirley, and told her to file everything the next morning. The day the papers were served, Clifford called me 7 times before noon. I let every call go to voicemail. By mid-afternoon, Shirley had filed the civil complaint, the formal fraud report with the county, and a motion to freeze all accounts tied to Briarwood Property Group. Stewart had already submitted his forensic report as supporting documentation. Everything landed at the same time from multiple directions, on the same day. That was intentional. Clifford had no time to move money, no time to prepare a story, no time to call in favors. He showed up at my door that evening. No Nadine this time, just him, standing on the porch in a jacket he had clearly pulled on in a hurry. His voice was different than it had been on Sunday. The easy confidence was gone. "What are you doing, Lenny?" He said it quietly, almost like he was genuinely confused. "You're going to drag the whole family through court over this." "I'm not dragging anyone," I said. "I am protecting what Dad left me. Dad wanted us to handle this together, as a family." "Then why did you change the numbers on his will?" He went still, just for a second, but I saw it. I held the door open. "Good night, Clifford." He stood there a moment longer, then walked back to his car without another word. I closed the door and stood in the hallway. My hands were steady. I had been waiting for that conversation for 3 weeks, and it had lasted less than 2 minutes. That told me everything I needed to know about how prepared he actually was. The next 2 months were not dramatic. That is the part nobody talks about when it comes to legal disputes. There's no music playing. There's no moment where everything clicks into place in a single afternoon. There are emails from Shirley with document requests. There are follow-up calls from Stewart asking for bank records going back further than expected. There are nights where you sit in your kitchen at 11 p.m., reading through affidavits and wondering if you missed something. Clifford's attorney, Randall Ogden, sent 2 letters during that period. The first suggested we were pursuing a frivolous claim and threatened countersuits. The second, which arrived about 6 weeks later, had a noticeably different tone. It proposed mediation. It referenced Clifford's family obligations and his history of managing the estate without compensation. Shirley called me after the second letter. "They are scared," she said. "Ogden knows what Stewart's report shows. They are looking for a way out that does not end with Clifford in front of a judge." "Is there one?" I asked. "Not one that is fair to you," she said. I told her we were not mediating. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday in October. I had not slept well the night before, but not because I was afraid. It was more like the feeling before a big project inspection. You have done the work. You have checked everything twice, but you still lie there running through the checklist one more time. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lighting, the kind of room that reminds you this is not TV. Clifford sat at the defendant's table with Randall Ogden. He was wearing a dark suit, and he had the look of a man who had been told by his lawyer to sit still and say as little as possible. Nadine was in the gallery. She had chosen a seat near the back. Judge Gloria Fenn came in without ceremony and sat down. She was in her late 50s, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, a notepad already open in front of her. She looked like someone who had heard every variation of this story before and had run out of patience for the ones who thought they were the exception. Shirley presented first. She walked through the timeline clearly and without drama. The power of attorney signed 4 years ago. The specific language prohibiting encumbrance of jointly owned real property. The Briarwood Property Group, incorporated the same month, sole owner Clifford Ray Hartwell. 4 years of rental income totaling $100 and $400 deposited into Briarwood, 0 transferred to Leonard Hartwell. The Delwood mortgage for $150,000 executed using the power of attorney 3 years ago proceeds unaccounted for. Then she put the 2 wills side by side on the projector screen, the original on the right, the altered photocopy on the left. The difference in the Carver Street split highlighted in yellow 50-50 versus 70-30s. Ogden objected twice during this portion. Judge Fenn overruled both without looking up from her notepad. Then Shirley called Alvin Pruitt. Alvin is 55, an electrician, and he has been renting the Carver Street property for 7 years. He was visibly uncomfortable on the stand, the way honest people often are in courtrooms. He testified that he had paid his rent every single month by check, made out to Briarwood Property Group as instructed by his rental agreement. He had a folder with him containing copies of every check he had written over 7 years. He placed it on the railing when asked. He testified that he had never received any communication from a Leonard Hartwell. He did not know I existed until Shirley's office contacted him 2 months prior. Shirley asked him one final question. In 7 years of renting this property, did anyone other than representatives of Briarwood Property Group ever contact you regarding the tenancy? No, Alvin said. Just Clifford. Always just Clifford. Clifford's jaw tightened. Ogden put a hand on his arm. Judge Fenn looked over her glasses at the defendant's table for a long moment. Then she wrote something on her notepad. Mr. Ogden, she said, your client will have the opportunity to respond. I suggest he use it carefully. Ogden put Clifford on the stand. I think it was a mistake. I think Ogden probably knew it was a mistake. But when your client has no documentary defense and the other side has a forensic accountant, a paper trail going back 4 years, a live witness with 7 years of rent checks, and an original will sitting in evidence, you run out of options. You put your client up there and you hope he holds together. Clifford did not hold together. He started reasonably enough. He said Briarwood had been set up for administrative convenience. He said managing 2 properties across town while also running his own brokerage was complicated, and routing income through a single entity made bookkeeping cleaner. He said he had always intended to reconcile the accounts with me once the estate was formally settled. Judge Fenn let him talk. She did not interrupt. She just watched him over her reading glasses with the expression of someone waiting for a bus they know is running late. Ogden walked him through the mortgage next. Clifford said the Dellwood property had needed significant structural repairs. He said he had used the mortgage proceeds to fund those repairs and had planned to repay the loan from future rental income. He said this was a reasonable business decision made in the interest of preserving the asset's value. Shirley stood up. Your Honor, may I? Judge Fenn nodded. Shirley approached the stand with a single sheet of paper. She handed it to Clifford. Can you identify this document? Clifford looked at it. It appears to be a contractor invoice. That is correct. It is an invoice for $8,400 in roof repairs to the Dellwood property, dated 14 months ago. It is the only repair invoice your attorney produced in discovery. Can you explain what happened to the remaining $141,650 mortgage? Clifford said there had been other expenses, ongoing maintenance, property management costs, Shirley said. Your attorney produced one invoice in discovery, one, for $8,400. We are asking about $141,600 in dollars. Ogden objected. Judge Fenn overruled and told Clifford to answer the question. Clifford said the records were not all organized in one place. He said some expenses had been paid in cash. He said he would need time to compile everything. Judge Fenn set her pen down. Mr. Hartwell, you're a licensed real estate broker of 25 years. You incorporated a business entity specifically to manage these properties, and you're telling this court that you cannot account for $101,600 in mortgage proceeds because the records are not organized. Clifford said, it is complicated. I see, she said, and picked her pen back up. That was the moment I knew it was over, not because of anything dramatic, not because Clifford broke down or confessed, just that one exchange. Judge Fenn had heard everything she needed to hear. What happened next, I did not expect. Clifford looked over at me from the stand. We had not made direct eye contact the entire morning. He held it for a few seconds, and then he said, quietly enough that I almost did not catch it, I thought you would just sign the papers, Lenny. I really thought you would just sign them. I did not respond. There was nothing to say to that. Ogden tried a final argument about the altered will, suggesting the photocopy discrepancy was a scanning error, a printing artifact, nothing deliberate. Shirley put Stewart back on the stand for 10 minutes. He walked through the font inconsistency, the line spacing difference, and the metadata from the file Clifford's attorney had submitted in discovery, which showed the document had been edited in a PDF program 2 years after the original was notarized. Ogden did not object. He was already packing his notepad. Judge Fenn called a brief recess and came back 20 minutes later with her preliminary ruling. She looked at Clifford first. Mr. Hartwell, I want to be direct with you. The evidence presented today establishes that you used a legal instrument in direct violation of its explicit terms to encumber property you did not solely own. You incorporated a business entity that received income belonging in part to your brother and transferred none of it to him over a period of 4 years. And a document submitted by your own attorney contains alterations that your own opponent's forensic expert has traced to a PDF editing session occurring years after the original was executed. She paused. This court finds for the plaintiff on all primary claims. She read the preliminary terms clearly and without hurry. Full restitution of Leonard Hartwell's 50% share of all Briarwood rental income, $95,700 plus accrued interest. Clifford responsible for satisfying the Dellwood mortgage from his share of any future property proceeds. Leonard to retain full rights to his equal portion of both properties. All of Clifford's court and legal fees transferred to the plaintiff, totaling $92,000. She removed her reading glasses. Additionally, given the evidence regarding the altered will document, I'm referring this matter to the county prosecutor's office for review. That determination is outside this court's jurisdiction, but I want the record to reflect that this court considers the evidence significant. She looked at Clifford one final time. You had a brother who trusted you. He gave you that trust because your father asked him to, and you used it. I hope the $191 was worth what it cost you. She banged the gavel. We are adjourned. Clifford sat at the defendant's table for a long moment after everyone else had started moving. Ogden said something to him quietly. Clifford did not respond. He was staring at the table in front of him. Nadine left the gallery without looking at him. I walked out into the hallway where Beverly and Philip were waiting. Beverly pulled me into a hug before I could say anything. Philip shook my hand and then pulled me in too. I did not say much. There was not much to say. The work was done. The paperwork had spoken exactly the way Stewart said it would. We went and got lunch at a diner 2 blocks from the courthouse. I had a turkey sandwich and coffee. It was a good sandwich. That is what I remember most from that afternoon. Just sitting in a booth with my kids, eating a good sandwich, and not having anywhere urgent to be. The criminal referral took 4 months to move through the prosecutor's office. Clifford was charged with abuse of power of attorney, estate fraud, and 1 count of document forgery. He accepted a plea agreement, 3 years probation, full restitution, and permanent revocation of his real estate broker's license. 25 years of building that career, gone. Nadine was investigated separately for her role in structuring the Briarwood accounts. She was not charged, but her name was in the public filings. In a town where she had spent years building a reputation as a financial consultant, that was its own consequence. I heard through Beverly that she had lost 3 clients within a month of the filings becoming public record. Clifford tried to reach me twice after the plea was entered. The first time he left a voicemail. He said he was sorry. He said he had convinced himself that I did not really need the money, that I was comfortable, that he was doing most of the work anyway, and it was only fair. He said he knew that was wrong. He said he hoped someday I would be willing to talk. I listened to it once and did not call back. The second time he sent a letter. I read it, put it in a drawer, and have not looked at it since. Maybe someday I will. I'm not ready to say I never will. But I'm also not going to pretend that sorry covers 4 years of deliberate choices. He did not make one mistake. He made hundreds of them, 1 transaction at a time over 4 years. That is not a lapse. That is a decision made over and over again. I sold the Carver Street property 8 months after the judgment. The market was good and I did not have any attachment to it. It had been a source of income my father intended for both of us, and then it had been a source of evidence. I did not need to keep it. I kept Dellwood. I'm still not entirely sure why. Some mornings I drive over and sit outside for a few minutes. The oak tree in the front yard that my father planted the year I was born is enormous now. The porch he built is still level, which tells you something about how carefully he worked. I do not go inside. I just sit there for a while and then I drive home. I have been renting it to a young family for the past year. They have 2 kids and a dog that dug up part of the front lawn, which I told them not to worry about. My father would have said the same thing. The money from the settlement and the Carver Street sale went into an investment account managed by someone I interviewed 3 separate times before I hired her. I'm not wealthy, but I'm not worried either, which at 68 is about the best outcome you can ask for. Beverly and I went to Wyoming last fall. We hiked more than I expected to and ate well every night. Philip is talking about a fishing trip to Montana in the spring. I told him to book it. I joined a woodworking class at the community center on Wednesday evenings. I'm not especially talented at it. The instructor is a retired high school shop teacher named Howard, who has the patience of someone who has spent 30 years watching teenagers try to use a chisel for the first time. I have made a small shelf and a cutting board that is slightly uneven on one end. Both are in my kitchen. I like them. I'm not going to tell you that everything feels resolved, because that is not quite true. Clifford is my brother. He will always be my brother. There is a version of him I grew up with, who taught me how to throw a curveball and drove me to the hospital when I broke my wrist at 14. That person was real. What he did over these past 4 years was also real. Both things are true at the same time, and I have stopped trying to make them fit together neatly. A few months after the judgment, I was out front trimming the hedges at my house when a car slowed down on the street. An older sedan with some rust showing around the rear wheel well. It rolled past slowly without stopping, then turned at the corner and was gone. I think it was him. I went back to trimming. There was still half the hedge left, and the afternoon light was good. That is what I remember about that moment. Not anger, not satisfaction, just the hedge and the light and the work in front of me. That is what I want to leave you with. If you're listening to this and you have a family member managing something on your behalf, go find the paperwork. Read it carefully. Understand exactly what authority you gave and what limits you set. Not because everyone will do what Clifford did, but because trusting someone is not the same as knowing what they are doing. My father trusted me with that original will because he knew I was careful. I should have applied that same carefulness to everything that followed. It is not too late to look at what you signed. It is not too late to ask the questions you have been putting off. And if you're in the middle of something like this right now, know that the law is slower than you want it to be and more thorough than they are counting on. They counted on me being too trusting to check. They were right about that for a while. They forgot that careful men eventually do check. I'm Leonard Hartwell. That is my story. Thank you for listening.